course shells as an example. I'm assuming that everyone who is attending at least knows what modules are for and how to set them up. I've seen most of your classes, so I know that to be the case. And so you also know that there is no one approach to using modules. They can be used to showcase thematic content. You could have a module that is full of the files that you're using in your course, or one that is just dedicated to your Zoom links, or as in the case of this course, you could make each unit of instruction a module. I choose to organize my courses week by week, one module for each week, as well as this introductory module on Canvas tutorials, and one for the final project. But those are just a couple of approaches, and Jenny will talk about others. I keep learning about new features in Canvas myself. I have just recently discovered a few tricks that you can do with modules, so I'm going to cover those today. But to begin with, I want to talk about a couple of basic structuring things you can do with modules. In most of my weekly modules, what I have done is have introduced text headers and also introduced indents in the columns. Now, this has no practical effect on how students interact with the content. The text headers are just that. They cannot actually be selected by students. They don't lead anywhere. But what they do, what the indents do, is provide a little bit of visual structure to the modules. If you have a longish module with lots of pages, assignments, etc., this gives students a bit of a roadmap, and possibly if they're proceeding step by step, a means of mentally breaking down the content. And the way to add text headers is very straightforward. It's the same as adding any other type of module content. You just go to the plus sign and you go to the add dropdown, and then you choose text header. So supposing I included more stuff in the beginning of the module, I could say I could put module intro in there. And let's say I just drag that to the very top of the module. And as for indents, that's also quite straightforward. You go to the 3 dots on the side, and you can increase the indent, and then do the same thing to decrease it. Now I'll cover a few other features of modules, some of which I think are new. Either that or I have overlooked them for a long time, which is quite possible. The first one is the move contents option. You can easily move stuff around in a course, as most of you probably know, simply by dragging and dropping. And often that may be all you need to do. But suppose, for example, that you wanted to merge a couple of modules. Let's say I want to put this Canvas tutorials one into the week 1 module, perhaps to reinforce my expectation that students will view it. So I'm going to go to move contents, and I'm going to choose the week 1 module, and I'm going to put that at the top. Very straightforward, quick way to condense modules. I believe the copy to and send to functions are relatively new. Supposing I wanted to share a module, move it to another course, copy it to another course, the default option for a long time, and one which is still available, is to import the module from one course to another using a select specific content option in the dialog. I think most of you know how to do that. But now there is this more direct option, which is very straightforward. You simply select a course, and probably the easiest way to pull it up would be by the course code, if you know it. This is one of my demo courses. So I'm just going to copy it like that. And that operation takes only a couple seconds. I talked about commons a little bit in the in-service presentation I did. I want to point out again how easy it is to share stuff from your courses to commons. And the option for that is right here in the same menu. However, there is another option that is even quicker if you want to directly share content with another instructor. Suppose you are working with an instructor who has inherited one of your old sections and you want to quickly share some course content with them. You can use the send to option for that. And there I can just send it to Jeni. And to be honest, I just discovered this, so I'm not quite sure how it looks on the other end. Maybe Jeni can take a look at how that looks on her end at the end of her portion of the presentation. But I would assume that there's a notification. Okay, Mariah says, shows us up as a number next to your name in the account. Thank you. Are there any questions about these features that I have pointed out before I turn the presentation over to Jeni?
I have a question, Mattias.
Certainly.
If I want to print a lesson, for example, where do I go? Just for example, week one, I have 4 lessons for each week. So if I want to print week one, send it to a student or email.
I think this is an area where Canvas is still not that strong.
I can always extend it, obviously. But I noticed after 1 week, if I do twice the same name, I cannot, then it's not allowed for them to do the homework.
What I would do for printing, in the case of just, are you just talking about page content? Mm-hmm. I would just use Control P to print the page on the screen.
Okay. Got it.
Okay, if there are no further questions, I will turn things over to Jeni.
All right, so just starting with a question, how do you take what you're doing in a face-to-face classroom and then break it down into pieces and decide which pieces go into Canvas and which pieces stay in the classroom? So that's what I'll be looking at today with you, is thinking about just the basic building blocks that go into a lesson, and then how to choose which ones you're going to put in Canvas and which ones you're going to continue using in a face-to-face classroom or on Zoom. Now, you may have heard of flipped learning. That's one way to do it, to put some content in Canvas and allow students to explore it, and then bring them into the classroom and then use that time to create a product or discuss what they've read or to move on from there. And if you know about flipped learning, that's great. But then the question is, what pieces go into Canvas if I'm going to do flipped learning? Then there's also the question of just lessons where you're teaching a skill or a behavior. How do I break that down into pieces in Canvas, into pages, into discussions, into quizzes? What does that look like? So we're going to back up and just look at some learning theory, which is really where we want to start if we're going to look at all of those pieces. I'm going to share my screen, my whole screen, so it's going to look a little funny here as I get to the screen. You'll see that in my Canvas account, I do have a little number next to my name. So it looks like somebody shared some content with me. So I will look at that later. So that's what Mattias just sent right now. So the objective for today is to help all of you engage students in meaning making by using a couple of methods for organizing those learning experiences online. And we'll look at two different models. These are two different ways of breaking down a lesson or breaking down a whole several weeks of a topic into smaller pieces. And what do those pieces look like? Just think for a minute. If I break down my lesson, if I'm teaching for an hour, what's happening in that hour? Okay, I have direct instruction where I'm teaching them and talking to them about something. I might have some time for them to try it. Then I might have some time for discussion and saying, okay, where were mistakes made? Then I might have them try it again on their own or practice that skill. And those are really the basic building blocks that you're working with, right? You have your basic building blocks that you're now putting online. You're taking from face-to-face or another environment and putting them online. So you have direct instruction, which is that transfer of information. What does that look like online? You might create a mini lecture or a PowerPoint. You might use a publisher video or even a video from an educational site that explains the concept really well. Modeling is something that you might want to move online and have that be one of your blocks or your pieces in Canvas as you're breaking it down for the students. You'll have discussion. That's one that many of you are probably already using in Canvas. But it can be, you can encourage students as well to do that discussion. Maybe do it online. So that's another possibility. Research and exploration. This is a good one. This is great to help students really evaluate the content that they're finding online as they research and then share it with one another, to help them with their digital literacy skills, which is so important now. Evaluating the sources, evaluating the content, and you get to see that happening if you give them a place where they can research the topic and then share what they're finding out with other students in the classroom using maybe a shared document or Padlet or Flipgrid. These are tools on the right. Collaborative tasks, we've been talking about that. Practice and review. What's great now with so much technology is sometimes they can do that on their own and check their answers, always remembering that. Assessment piece. And then the reflection piece, which is something that I'll be talking about since that's important as well in online learning. So the first model we'll look at is the Madeline Hunter model, and this one's been around for a long time. It's a way to organize some of those blocks that I was just showing to you. So you may know this method intrinsically, just because you're a good instructor, you start out with something to get the student's attention. That's called an anticipatory set. That actually has a name. Sometimes it's called a hook to get their attention. It creates that framework for the ideas or information that's going to follow. Sometimes it can be just a question, or it could be a problem. So that puts them in that receptive frame of mind. And you can start your module in Canvas with a short video or with a question. Sometimes this appears in a page at the beginning of the module called About Module. And you might want to start that page before you get into your objectives, which is number 2. You might want to start with a question to frame the content that's to follow. Then the second block you have is the objective or purpose. Then you have the input. So this is where you put your instructor video or your reading assignments or time, maybe a publisher's video on how to do this particular skill. You have modeling, so lots of good examples, maybe even a walkthrough. Then check for understanding. What does this look like online? I'm thinking it might look like submitting an assignment so that you can see if the students are understanding the concept before you move on to the next one, which is guided practice. And again, this is where they would be doing a problem set in their textbook. This particular model we're looking at, you've probably figured it out now. What is this going to work with? Is this going to work better for something like English and the humanities and the sciences, or is this going to work better for math and maybe other skills like that? Math or humanities? You can put your guess in the chat if you have a guess. Do you think this is going to be a good model for math or humanities? Is anybody bold enough to guess? Yes, you're right, math. This is a classic model for math. And the example I'll show you now, and let me just take a minute and copy the link into the chat so you can see what I'm looking at. I'm sending the Madeline Hunter model. And so you have that if you want to open that on your screen. And now I'm going to show you an example of a course that uses this model. It was interesting to me because I thought, I wonder what other universities are doing, what models they're using. And so I'm looking at Eastern. They published this, you can find it too. And they're using this Madeline Hunter model to arrange their modules. So let's look at this. We've got here in the overview, let me show you that. Let's click on that and see what they do here. In their overview, they have critical question that lines up with the anticipatory set. They start with a question. Then they have module objectives. So far, so good. We're following the Madeline Hunter model. Let's go back and see what else is next here. Then they have lecture materials. That would be input. So we're following the model here. Next, we have discussion. This fills the need for checking for understanding because the students are sharing what they think so far about the content and the input, and now they're sharing what they think, the conclusions that they're drawing. And it gives the teacher as well as other students an opportunity to weigh in and maybe correct some thinking if it's not correct. Then next we have guided practice. This takes the form of maybe going through some problems and then seeing the answers to make sure that they're getting them correct. Then we have independent practice. Now they're taking a quiz. They're on their own. They don't have any help. They're going to do it on their own and see if they can do it on their own without help. And we have independent practice again with a project. And this is very nice here. I'd like that there's extra credit that doesn't fit specifically into the model, but what we have here is a summary, which in the model I was showing you is called closure. And this is a really nice way to sum up. These are the skills that you should have learned in this module, and it ties it all together. And then it provides a transition to the next module and module 3 this is what you're going to be learning, to try to link that together and provide a transition. So this is the first example for you, and it's very straightforward. But for other subjects, we might want to do something a little bit different. And the next model I'll show you now, this is the second. Before we move on to the second model, I should just stop. Any questions in the chats or comments? Oh, I sent you the 5E. Let me send you the Madeline one.
Can you send me the other file?
All right. I was planning to just dump them all on you at the same time, but then I thought that wouldn't be nice. Here's the other one. And while I'm thinking about sending you the links, I'll send you the link. This is where Catlin talks about, she's somebody I follow who's really good at online instruction. She talks about those building blocks. So that's where I got that information. That was my source. So we just did Madeline Hunter. Are any of you using this model without maybe realizing what it was called? Great.
I have been using this model since 35 years ago.
Okay.
And I can't believe it. I hear again. When I graduated, that we needed to memorize all the steps.
Right.
And in our job interview, we were quizzed on this. So it is helpful to actually any course, because I do use it teaching language, like the hooked.
Mhm.
I do action verbs. So I dance, and then the students have to dance and they tell me what it is. So that's, just to do verbs.
Right.
Grammar.
Right. It gets their attention and it gets them moving. That's great on so many levels.
So it is helpful, not just for math, but I'm in love with it.
Right. You make a good point, because in language as well, you don't want students making mistakes early on and then have to fix them later. You want to catch them early on, because if we make a mistake more than once, it starts to become ingrained. It's like a golf swing. You want to make sure you have your golf swing right. It's a lot harder to unlearn something that's not learned correctly. So that's why this model is important for Spanish, for language learning, for math, for finance. You want to learn it right the first time. But the second model that I'm showing you here is called the 5E. And now you're asking them to explore a little bit and come up with some possibilities and ideas. And it's better for the sciences, and it's better for even humanities. And I'll just briefly go through these. We have the engage. That sounds very much like the anticipatory set. It's just another word where you get them involved in the new learning. So online, that could look like a short video or a reflection or a question, like we already saw. So that's very similar to the other model. This is where it diverges. Now, instead of, well, we would include objectives up there too with engage. But now this is where it diverges at explore. Instead of input, teacher input, we're letting the students explore the topic a little bit and investigate and observe, compare, contrast, and do all of those things. And so that explore part is going to look a little different in this model. It's not teacher input yet. Here in the explain, this is what students are doing. They are explaining. They're now drawing some conclusions and testing them and looking at maybe what current literature or current theory says, and comparing what they've come up with current literature. So again, a lot of higher thinking skills here. This is where the instructor can jump in too and say, okay, I need to redirect you a little bit. You might want to look at this again, or I know you like this model, but there's a better one out there. You need to keep researching. Then the extend or elaborate is when they this is a project or where they apply their new skill. This is really important to have it a real world type of project if possible. And then the evaluate is not necessarily the instructor evaluating. This is the student reflecting on the project or on the piece and doing a self-evaluation. And of course, it's helpful if the student has a rubric to maybe do a self-evaluation. It can also be the instructor that evaluates, but in this particular model, the emphasis is more on the learner and the process of learning. So it's usually the learner that does the evaluating. What does that look like in Canvas? I know this looks huge here, but we'll just look at the different pieces real quick. We've got, a second here. We've got the engage. We've got a real life scenario where there's a job interview. What do you say in your job interview? Of course, the student has no idea because they don't know anything about marketing yet and strategic planning. Then we have the objectives here. So this is the engage part. Then here's where I said it's a little bit different than the other model. This is where they get to explore some resources about mission statements and value propositions. Then we have the explaining stage. This is where the instructor might weigh in. If I were doing a flipped classroom, I would have this part, this explain part in the classroom. So the students would bring their notes and their ideas from this part, and they would bring it to me in the classroom. This could be a Zoom. This could be in a face-to-face classroom. Then the elaborate part is a real life project. They record an audio of themselves in a job interview responding to the question about strategic planning. And then they do a self-evaluation, which is combined with an instructor evaluation. And it's a wrap up there at the end. That can also be used for just a journal on what they've learned. It could be a collection of maybe some of the links and the articles that they found in this explore section that they want to keep in their portfolio, in a learning portfolio. That last piece could be a lot of different things. All right, I'm going to stop there again to see if there are questions or comments. So some of you are already using some of these pieces. This is a newer model compared to the first one. This is a new one. And I sent you the link. This is what it looks like. One comment on it is that it doesn't necessarily go from start to finish. You can have the explore, explain, then back to explore again and explain. It's not meant to be a one-day lesson. It's meant to cover 1 or 2 weeks. Usually in the sciences, this covers 1 or 2 weeks. It could be one day. You could do this in one day, but it's meant to take a little bit more time. So you give them more time to do each one of these. That's all the information I have for you. I feel like I dumped it on you a little bit. I sent the links. I could make them available somewhere else. If
I was
you
meaning your module, like in Canvas, like where you had, like, is that in Commons, right? Yeah, that.
No, but I can put it in Commons as an example of this. It's not the best example. I just put this together. These are actual pages though. I mean, I did fill it out a little bit, but it's not filled out as much as maybe somebody doing the class would. So
I don't need it that much. It was more the organization that you had like said, okay, here's some activities, and it's more like the visual, just even that, just the visual of it is what I was looking at.
Yes, I'll add it to Commons. Again, I think you are all doing parts of these. You're doing some of these, and then this is the theory behind what you're doing. This is the theory behind excellent instruction. I have witnessed somebody without any education, without a bachelor's degree, just no education in teaching at all, stand up and give a lesson and follow one of these models perfectly, because it's just innate. And so some of this you're already doing, but the reason why I think this is important is when you're moving it online is to make sure you have all of these pieces, because it's really easy to forget some of them as you move it, if it's an online course.
I agree that having templates that we can just look at goes such a long way to just learning design methods and just the practical aspects of Canvas organically. Like most of us, nobody really taught me how to use Canvas. I had a course to work with, and I learned by seeing what others had done, and then figuring a few things out on my own.
So when I was thrown into teaching an engineering class in January of 2016, I inherited a course from someone, and I had never seen Canvas before. And so having access to what that person had already set up inside of Canvas was incredibly helpful. And just like in programming, plagiarism is the name of the game. And that's how you write good programs. You can write good Canvas stuff if you are given an opportunity to plagiarize somebody else's material.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, Eastern has let us look at what they're doing. So, I mean, they know that course is open for us to learn from and look at and take a peek into. So it's great. I mean, from that course, I liked how they had critical question. I thought, oh, I can use that one right there. Critical question. I like that.
It is nice to know the name of the models. Like, I think we do, like you say, a combination of things, but I never really pay attention to the 5E. I know that we do the evaluation and the engagement and all that, but it's nice to know that as a model, actually a separate. So I like to learn, you know. I never done it. I have never done a Canvas. So I'm a novice level still. But I like it more and more. That's a good thing.
What's very different about the 5E model is that there's definitely more learner control. The learner is in charge of his learning, and I felt that as a student in a course that was designed that way. I thought, oh, I like this. I get to research, I get to pull this together, and it was motivating. I like to learn already, but it was very motivating. Well, I'll add these to the week 0 course, and under learning, maybe learning methods or learning models. So I'll include all the links and the resources there in the PDFs. Make sure that they're already accessible and ready for you to use.
And if someone does not have access to that course, just let one of us know and we'll add you.
Okay.
Well, thank you all for coming.
Thank you.
And thanks for the conversation.
Have a good day.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks.